Good morning. Let's see. All right, we have a whole minute before the start of the market. So let's set some stuff up really quick. I don't have a whole lot of time, so I just want to make a couple notes. It's near my 5 minute time frame. Okay, so we're gonna keep that as a note. Market has officially opened. No trade to be taken yet, so just completely fine to just wait. Now, obviously, we do have some selling going on. A 20 month. I want to look at the dollar really quick. Dollar elevated, but pulling back slightly. Liquid seeing some selling. Big seeing some selling. TLT seeing some selling. Just 10-year is elevated today, so that is slightly bearish. I do believe oil prices are elevated, so let's take a look at the USO. 121 a barrel. Jeez Louise. Very large cup formed. So I do want to draw that. There are some of these other drawings here. We'll take a look at the SPY and everything in a moment, but the SPY is not near the or lower Bollinger right now on the 5 minute time frame, so we do have a little bit to sit here and actually find a good trade. Uh, Almost a good short there, but not yet. Nvidia pushing the lower Bollinger here, pulling up from that. If Nvidia continues to push the lower Bollinger here, that can create a call opportunity. Apologize for all the messy drawings, everybody. Now, one thing we're looking for on Nvidia, I want to hide the Bollingers and everything for a moment, is that, delete our arrows from yesterday, is closing this cup towards the 179.94. Now, currently the market price is at $180.80, so it is starting to head towards that range. Looking extremely likely that that wants to close down. And that closes down. That actually completes this larger inverse cup and handle. So there can be some downside to NVIDIA today, but we do have to remember that at the bottom of this inverse cup, can expect to pull upward to create another handle to the downside. Let's check QQQ. Still no entry yet. Semiconductors starting to pull up towards the upper Bollinger. That can give us a very nice short. Our VVIX today is extremely elevated, so that is a selling signal. Now it is pushed into the upper Bollinger, so that can be somewhat of a signal that it can pull back slightly. Exxon is just kicking butt today. TLT still selling. Not exactly a bullish or bearish signal yet. Okay, let me go ahead and check chat. Good morning, everybody. So currently, we're just trying to identify a trade entry. Nothing popping up. That would have been a really good short. Nothing popping up just yet. Bitcoin, seeing a little bit of selling here. There's that Head and Shoulders from yesterday, finally taking off. Now, the thing we do have to contend with Bitcoin is that now that we do have this bear structure completing, this can create the conditions for a handle on this cup. So technically this can start pulling down, create the liquidity to head upward, which would take some of the equity weight with it. So with it being at the lower Bollinger here on the 5-minute time frame, 30-minute time frame, excuse me, 5-minute time frame, starting to head towards that lower Bollinger range, it can create the conditions to pull back up. So we are watching for that. The dollar is pulling down slightly, which that is usually a good thing for the market. Now the selling looks very strong, and this could be a good entry for a put to the lower Bollinger. Just again, it's not what I'm looking for an entry. I look for either the under or the lower Bollinger or the upper Bollinger for the entry. Um, but with this 20-mile range being tested and potentially being rejected here on the 5-minute time frame, that would give a very quality position to the lower Bollinger, which is at the 665.82. So roughly a whole $3.20 of downside if they aim to take it anyway. I'm not taking that trade just because, again, it is not within my entry. This is forming a micro cup, so that should be pushing up throughout the day. That should be taking some weight from equities. Good morning, everybody. You have a micro cup forming here on Bitcoin. So very likely retest the 20-mile, head back down. Now remember today is FOMC later, so a lot of this price action in the early market is going to be fairly tame, just due to the fact that anything news narrative driven is going to be during that FOMC. Now we are seeing the VVIX pulling back a little bit. Again, we did have the upper Bollinger here, so with the upper Bollinger, does create the conditions that it can pull back towards that little Bollinger. That would create some market conditions where market could be bullish, but just remember with the VVIX, as long as it is above this $98 range, we can start selling pretty much at any given time. So be aware of that. Semiconductors, hold on, I want to look at that. Daily. So I'm still pretty much fully expecting this to occur on the daily time frame. 5 miles at 335.92. Got up to 342.60. 20 mile is at the 344.72. So if we're going to head upward with semiconductors today, I would be expecting that 20 mile to be fully tested. That really gives us the upper range on semiconductors to be around the 346, 80. So we can be seeing some upside semiconductors. In SPY, we are seeing this 20-mile range so far building some support, which is exactly why I usually don't like to short those ranges. Um, Usually that 20-mile is kind of that contention range where it's either going to be bouncing up or rejecting downward. It might be because I believe I am paying for something to have the futures not be 15 minutes late. I'm gonna have to check that. Hold on. Get real-time quotes. Hold on. How do I see what all I get here? I do believe I'm paying for something extra to see future times without that delay. So that may be why. SPY still pulling upward. Now, whatever this futures thing is that I'm paying for to figure out on the computer what it's under, but I don't believe it costs too much. My monthly Weeble subscription is not too expensive at all, so definitely would suggest it. VIX still above the $20 range, so that is still telling us that we are within bear territory. Now, we do have some time to kind of go over the daily, so I think we might do that. So I guess this is really what we have to contend with here is that in a bear market, and I know not everybody agrees with me on that sentiment that we're in a bear market, but the reason why I'm saying we're in a bear market is because we are starting to really build some major support underneath this 50 mile on the daily time frame. That means that within a 3-month average time frame, we are seeing far more selling than we are buying. This is bringing us towards our 200 mile range, which we're not there yet, but the support is starting to build towards that range, which would allude to, seeing support building underneath that 200 mile range, which that is what the actual true quote unquote bear market is. This is a lot like how it was back in 2022, 2023. I want to say it was back right in here, if I remember correctly. Yep, right in here. And you can see how the 200 mile really consumed the overall market, consumed all the moving averages, and we were really just trading between those ranges underneath that 200 mile for roughly almost a year straight. I want to say, yeah, it was till the banks started blowing up, I believe. Yeah, when the banks started blowing up, and then we had Nvidia earnings, that's when the market really pulled out of that bear market. But anyway, 5-minute time frame again, pulling back down. So that short so far would have been okay, but again, it's still contention range, not the target that I'm looking for. I have not posted the actual trade consistency. I need to go through the actual trades and see the consistency on the zero DTs and everything. Um, but within the last, I want to say 2 months, over 90 something zero DT trades, I've only lost two of them. So that's actually still kind of shocks me. Um, However, I do take my trades very, very safe. I go specifically from the lower Bollinger or upper Bollinger to the 20 month and cut majority of the positions at that range. So for some, that leaves a lot of room on the table for um, you know, running profits, but at the same time, I use that running room for my running contracts. Um, but I take the majority of the profit at that 20 month and just wait for the next trade from there. Yeah, I hate to actually even bring it up just because it's such a wild trading statistic. I mean, most people don't even can't even think of that. So I don't like to bring that statistic up very much, but I've been absolutely killing it the last 2 months in terms of the zero TTs. Um, there was just the two misses, which one was when we had to um add to a, I believe, upper Bollinger push, and one of those positions did end up becoming red because of that. It was an extended upper Bollinger push. And the second one was on Friday when we were trying to catch the lower Bollinger um, on the daily time frame, the bottom Bollinger day two. Generally, from the bottom Bollinger day two, we have the large push up towards the 5 mile. I was expecting that to start occurring on Friday rather than on Monday. Um, so that was that second loss. Now for SPY, still just chopping at the 20 mile. Really expecting a lot of chopping here today. Again, we do have the FOMC later, so there isn't a lot of narrative right now to really tell buyers or sellers to press the button unless we, hear something from the war or if oil prices being so elevated causes selling or something like that. But from an actual narrative standpoint, we don't have any data or anything that's driving the market currently. We might get lucky here though and see tech and everything start pushing into this upper Bollinger, which would give us a very nice short entry. Is selling off very well today. Um, it's actually really surprising how much it's selling off. So pig being down roughly a whole 30 cents is actually very, very shocking. Um, Usually you don't see that type of price action within HIG. Um, it's not even really showing within the candle too much right now. But even for a major selling day, the HIG went from basically 79.78 down towards the 79.12. So that's kind of replicating a lot of that type of movement, even though again the candle isn't showing that in the daily time frame. We are towards this lower Bollinger though, which can create the conditions for buying, but that is still a lot of selling out of HIG. And we're not really seeing the same sort of selling out of liquid too much. Did have a few large candles in here. So that's interesting. look at semiconductors again. I want to take a look at NVIDIA. Do you have this inverse cup forming, or this cup, not inverse, standard cup? Very likely that's going to fill, give us our upper Bollinger move on semiconductors. So that can create a short, but I do want to look at NVIDIA and Microsoft really quick. So if Microsoft still towards its 20 mile range, so nothing too major in there yet. Major bear structure too much. NVIDIA, a little bit of a bounce from the lower Bollinger. Likely going to finish this cup. Should take us back up to that 182.73. That would give us our upper Bollinger entry into short positions, so we will be looking for those. Yeah, that's going to hit. So let's check SPY. I don't think this is going to correlate on SPY, so we may be taking positions that are not on SPY. Still just being patient here. I'm going to start looking at some semiconductor contracts though. The unusual whales bot, in the Discord. Hold on. I'm gonna see if I can. Hold on. I tagged the primary channel, in general in the Discord, but within that section that shows all the unusual whales, um, data and posts and everything. Yeah, I can take a look at Tesla. Yeah, let's look at Tesla. 5 minute time frame on Tesla is telling us that there is a short position here. But I want to look at the structure. Bullish structure potentially right there. The moving averages. Okay, so Tesla. Tesla's very complicated here because you do have this very, very, very large cup formed on the daily time frame. And from this cup, we are starting to see this bearish structure. I'm going to turn off the averages and Bollingers here just a second so that this becomes a little easier to see. At top of the cup, we do expect bearish structure. Now, we did not get the bearish structure at the actual top of the cup. It started pulling down and then forming that bearish structure, which that can happen. Um, with that said, the expectation should be to be pulling back up to form a handle back to the upside. However, daily time frame, get the moving averages and Bollingers here. Just want to make sure SPY is not giving us our entry yet. 1 second. Okay, so we're still good on semiconductors and SPY and everything. Okay, seeing a 20 mile test out of Tesla, that is good. High of the day was 402.58. 20 mile is at that 402.69, so that is starting to correlate to that. Extremely, extremely, extremely likely you're going to see a full 20 mod test in here, so you should be seeing all the way to the 404, 70 range. Thank you. Yeah, so that 404, 70 range. Now, Tesla is still in a bearish position, and back to the drawings, I'm going to delete this handle for a second. But Tesla is trading underneath the 50 mile here, so we do have to be very cautious of that. This is still technically within bearish territory, so we can see this continue to break down much further. This is starting to do pretty much the exact hallmarks of what a bear market does, which is to head up from the upper Bollinger, retest that 20 mile. I wish this showed a little better. Apologize. Reject that 20 mile, head back down to the lower Bollinger, head back up, retest the 20 mile, and rinse and repeat. Back down the lower Bollinger, back up to the 20 mile, down the lower Bollinger, and now we're back up at the 20 mile. So with this pattern, there's a few things I want you to see here. Is that one, I am making sure that we're not missing our semiconductor entry. We're not. Is that the selling to the downside is starting to taper out slightly. Okay, as you can see, the arrows here are larger and slowly starting to shrink. So this is telling you that a breakout or breakdown is getting ready to occur. Okay, so either you're going to get a very large move to the upside or a very large move to the downside. Now, your downside has already been active for, let's see, basically since the beginning of the new year. Um, actually slightly later than that, end of December, middle of December, when that downside really started to activate. So this is starting to look like that it does want to potentially see some range above the 20 mile here. But again, in keeping the structure, you can continue to see the breakdown towards that 20 mile or towards the lower Bollinger again before seeing, some reprieve. So that's what I'm watching for on Tesla. That's really what I'm quote unquote worried about. But the selling does look like it's tapering out. This upside is looking very good. And within the actual structures, see that there is a very large consolidation range right at the bottom here, and we're going to mark this in white. So with that consolidation range being hit, we have seen this inverse cup closed, potentially seeing a little bit of upside from that. Or no, actually the inverse cup closed over here, which is also a bullish signal. Because from that inverse cup closing, we should now be expecting some upside to continue further downward, which I know that looks bearish currently, but in hindsight, that bearish movement back upwards sometimes leads to that upside breakout, and that's how we can get that cup and handle breakout. So, um, hopefully that answers your question with Tesla. I know it doesn't exactly tell you the direction or anything. Um, let's look at semiconductors really quick again. 5-minute time frame. Entry is still not here. I want to look at. So our entry's almost here, so I'm going to start pulling up some semiconductor contracts on my phone and getting those priced out for us. Just one moment though. Do want to take a look at the VVIX pulling up to 116. So that is starting to create that cup back up towards the 119. That is a very, very bearish signal. And it's doing that while the market's actually chopping at the same range. So with the SPY basically being right at this 20 mile range, we're seeing the VVIX pulling up a whole $2. So that can be very indicative of some major downside. Okay, so let's take a look at some semiconductor contracts. And I want to look at, hold on, I want to look at SOX S. So the SOX S, let's see, I'd probably take the 38 call. Look at actual semiconductor puts for a moment as well. So you're basically paying the same for a 340, right? Not. You're paying much less for a SOX S call to the upside. Yeah, so if we get our semiconductor upper Bollinger entry here, we will be taking the SOX S 38 calls. Those are likely 135-ish each. And not taking them yet. We are waiting for that upper Bollinger to be pushed. Q sitting at that 20 mile. Want to check SPY and TLT. TLT seeing a little bit of buying potentially in here. Can be creating this reverse head and shoulders. So we will be looking for that. Still waiting for our entry on semiconductors. EQ still holding on to support at that range above the 20 mile. So 20 miles at the 601.63. Bitcoin completed that inverse cup that we talked about. Micron should complete this cup towards the 168 or 468, excuse me. So that should give us the upside within semiconductors that we need. Nvidia is closing this bullish cup here too. So those should give us the upside that we're looking for. Got USO. Still very elevated. By potentially closing this inverse cup down the 660, 690. So a further rejection from here would be showing that the VVIX is still pulling upward very aggressively, so the likelihood of that occurring is very high. Waiting for our entry on semiconductors very, very soon here. That entry is going to be around the 342.80, so we are looking for that. XY pulling down, but starting to head back up slightly, so a little bit of a bearish indicator. Bitcoin pulling down, but now that it is within the 5 minute time frame or 5 minute lower Bollinger, that can create some buying to the upside. Semiconductors have not given us our entry yet. Okay, and I'm going to have the screen watch semiconductors just for a moment because I need to drink some coffee. So I will be muted for just a couple minutes, but I am here, so I'll be right back. Okay, Success is starting or Socks is starting to pull up, so I am here. Again, we're still waiting for this upper Bollinger entry. Currently, upper Bollinger is at that 342.68, so getting up there any moment. Now, this can correlate to a upper Bollinger push within the SPY. Not really expecting that, but it can correlate. And we're going to start getting ready to toss our orders in. Not yet, though. So for these 38 success calls, and if you don't want to buy the 38 call, you can go all the way up to the 40. We're using this purely as a scalp or 0 DT type trade unless we see some major downside today. So keep that in mind. But with that said, I am starting to put a bid on these contracts at 121. Okay, and I will pull that bid up as necessary. Again, we're really waiting for this upper Bollinger on semiconductors to be pushed. We're not going to be entering prior to that. Really just be patient for that level. And I am looking at the VVIX on my phone. It is at the 115.71, so it has pulled down very slightly. That pull down can correlate well with this semiconductor upper Bollinger push, assuming we actually get it. QQQ is also getting ready to push its upper Bollinger. Jeez, I need to charge my phone. Upper Bollinger on QQQ is at the 603.07. So we will be looking at QQQ for some contracts as well. Assuming we actually push the level. So far we're not there yet. Let's take a look at QQQ. So still about $1.30 away. We need some form of upside push to really secure us these upper Bollinger moves. So far, nothing is really giving us that weight yet. Lot of chop. Bitcoin should be pulling up here very slightly, which should correlate to equities seeing a little bit of buying weight. So we didn't get our entry yet, but doesn't mean we won't. Nvidia seeing that upper Bollinger move. Microsoft still breaking down. Just waiting for something to give us an entry here. SPY starting to reject the 20 mile here, looking very likely to close this inverse cup towards that 660, 690. It's really a shame that semiconductors didn't pull up another 40 cents. I think it's just barely going to reject that upper Bollinger and not give us our entry. But that's okay. It's always better just to be patient and wait. Video should be pulling back down here since it is within the upper Bollinger. Should be pushing semiconductors down slightly. Now, potentially on SPY, just look at this really quick. So this inverse cup here is extremely likely to form. However, what I'm really trying to determine is that are the dealers wanting that chunk of liquidity before they push upward? So we'll mark this, keep that on reserve. This is looking very good for the push down to bounce out. Starting to form that handle a bit. So expectation can be to form the handle to the upside on the video. That would give us our entry to semiconductors. VVIX is pulling back up once again. Very likely we see this 119 range today. Q can be closing that inverse cup to the 599.97 just like SPY is doing. Towards that 666.90. SPY is. Want to take a look at the dollar. Still pulling down, but with it being in the lower Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame, it can once again create the conditions to start pulling back up. So we will be looking for that. Get the USO again. That is still super pushed up on the day. So that's going to be taking weight from equities. Are we above the FIMA? FIMA is at the 667.15, so I do want to edit this. Not gonna let me edit it. There we go. So we are doing a 5-mile test currently. The upper bounds on the 5-mile today should be at that 669, which we did see the high of 669.72. So technically we have tested the upper bounds of the 5-mile. The lower bounds of the 5-mile does take us towards the bottom of this liquidity range, which would be towards that 665 range. So this does correlate a lot with a 5-mile move. Basically, the 5-mile should be. I will edit this box. So that's basically the 5 mile level on the day in terms of the upper and lower bounds. So as you can see, price hit just above it to that upper bounds. Now we're testing the actual moving average itself and likely should see the lower bounds of that level as well. So that is what we are looking for. It's going to the side just as a reminder. A lot of chop today, but again, we don't really have any data or anything until the FOMC, which that's still a whiles away. Hopefully on semiconductors, we'll retest this 20 mile range at the 340.20 and hopefully bounce upward so that way we can get our entry into the upper Bollinger there. I did not take the Soxus contract at the top, but Soxus contract is up roughly $40 so far, so that is nice. Micron can be giving us a cup and handle breakout here, so we will be looking for that. I want to check liquid. Liquid is still just holding that range. HIG. HIG is still pushing downward, so that is a very, very bearish signal. Hopefully that bounce in the video will give us upside to this. Apologize, I sound so tired. Not exactly the most exciting day so far. The price action is just extremely, extremely slow. Actually, we would have already had at least a scalp or two. Now, while we do have downtime, if anybody has any questions about any symbols or technicals or anything, it's a great time to ask because we're just pretty much chopping right now. So, we're looking for this 660, 690 range out of SPY. Very likely from that range will bounce, but so far nothing has opened up. I want to see this on Micron because if we invalidate this bullish cup, that would show us that we would be heading down quite a bit. So that's kind of what I'm expecting, somewhat out of the cup. But if we continue pushing downward, we would invalidate that cup to the upside, which would show us that there is a lot more weight on the selling side today. So we'll be taking a look at that. Still just waiting for entry on anything. BVIX still pulling up, so this is still telling us that the selling is very present today. We're basically just trying to look for a short entry at this point. The market is very, very bearish overall. Now, normally I would be trying to scalp individual symbols, but for the stream, I'm really not trying to really overextend everybody right now. Even though the price action might be very tame currently, for the streams, I do try to stick to the larger indexes just because they have the better price action. They're just overall a little safer to trade. Usually the contracts are far more liquid, usually cheaper. Not always the case though. There's SPY hitting that 666.90 range. So with this pushing down, this can create the conditions for a call upside scalp. Not exactly something I want though. But it is creating the conditions for it. You see the price action pushed into the lower Bollinger on the 30-minute time frame too. So this is telling us that calls are very, very likely going to see some upside. It's very likely we see the bottom of this range taken first prior to any upside. So I will be looking for that. That bottom of this range is at the 665, basically the 665.30. So we will be looking for calls from that upside or from that downside. Anybody who took those success calls, you are up roughly $80, so that's cool. SPY, I'm looking at the calls. Now again, I won't be taking the call until we hit this full downside. Um, really looking basically right at that 665 range. So I will be patient for that, just because there is this very large chunk of liquidity there. It's extremely likely the dealers try to aim for that. And I'm starting to get ready to enter into calls. Really going to be as patient as possible to wait for the bottom of that range. Really don't want to take any contracts prior to that. Now this can bounce out of that range prior to us getting our level, so just be aware of that. This is just something I'm personally looking for, but technically the call level is here. Um, so be aware of that. Starting to see some large selling orders coming in through the shares. So very likely we should see our range. Look at the VVIX again. Yep, definitely trying to push towards 119. Give us a very nice call upside. Once that level is reached, go back to QQQ. Again, still looking for that level. Same with SPY. Now, VVIX is still super, super, super elevated and it is climbing. So, um, I'm really, really, really looking for this range at the very bottom here. We can be bouncing out of this prior to that, but I'm really going to be looking for that bottom range. Yep. If we miss a trade, we miss a trade. It happens. We just wait for the next. So I don't think we'll be missing this trade here though. I'm very certain we'll see this level pushed. Yeah, we could definitely push that 663 today. The conditions for selling are very, 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 very present. I mean, the VVIX is just absolutely flying today. Um, yeah, it can turn into an extremely large selling day. We're seeing our US 10-year pulling up. Now these dealers better give me my level. Look at the VVIX again. Still pulling upward slightly, so I'm really expecting this to create an inverse cup to the downside. Something like that. So I am looking for that. Can lead that arrow. That short position this morning would have been very good at that 20-mile range, but again, that's just not what I target for my short entries. Yeah, what I'm looking for here is showing on the 1 minute time frame. So I am looking for this to basically reject this 20 mile range, start pulling back down, and create another lower Bollinger move on the 1 minute time frame, which would give us that inverse cup to the downside on the 5 minute time frame as well. So I am looking for that before I enter these calls. Like I said, I really, really do want the bottom of that range hit. Something got filled. BVIX still pulling upward pretty aggressively, so we should be seeing our lower level that we're expecting here. Six. We'll be right back. Just one moment. But we're watching the SPY currently for our entry. I love to hear it. Great job. Great job on the win. I will be right back in just a couple seconds though, but I am here. I am back. Sorry, we're looking for calls currently, even though the market is bearish. Um, from the bottom of this range would create a very large inverse cup. Excuse me. I talk very well right now. Would create this very large inverse cup, and from the bottom of that range, we do expect bullish structure. And the reason why we expect that bullish structure is to create the inverse cup back down to the downside. So while we were originally wanting a put within the day, I'm going to turn off the drawings for a second, but we were wanting a put originally if we were going to push into that upper Bollinger. But now that we're starting to push into the lower Bollinger range, we do want to get a call to grab that liquidity as, the market is very bearish. Um, Bears do want further downside very likely. And because of that, they do want to grab further puts to be able to continue doing that. Um, and continue building the liquidity to push downward. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for this bottom of the cup to really be completed, to start building some bullish structure from there, take the calls to the upside. Now, those calls again, they're not exactly bullish calls. Um, they're entirely for bearish liquidity, so we're going to be in and out. And from being in and out, we will be looking for further puts to the downside at that point. So, really, that's what we're looking for. We did not. get the puts at the beginning of the day because we did not push into that upper Bollinger. So now that we are starting to push this lower Bollinger range, we look for the calls. That's the theory, anyway. Yeah, I fully expect us to hit below this range. Very, very, very likely we hit at this 664.70 range. So I am definitely waiting on the calls for that. Hold on. Sorry about that. My wife dropped her hair straightener in the sink. Um, anyway, let's hold on. I will take a look at silver and apple, but I do want to ensure we get our entry. The 666 is super, super strong, so our entry is not going to last long at all. Um, to me, this is the type of day where I feel like our entry is only going to be there for a few seconds. So we do want to catch this, and then I will be more than happy to go over precious metals and Apple. Yeah, this 666 will definitely crack. They're definitely building a inverse cup to the downside. 5 minute time frame or the 1 minute time frame shows this really well. And you can use the 1 minute time frame exactly like the 5 minute time frame. It's just obviously it's going to move a lot faster. Um, but from the bottom Bollinger here, we have pulled to the 20 mile. Now we're retesting this 20 mile range, and as of typing or talking, we're starting to see this cup closing to the downside. So, um, exactly what we were looking for there. And back to the 5 minute time frame, this is showing our inverse cup pushing down. So we should be fully expecting further downside. 1 minute time frame shows us that our lower Bollinger is at that 665.40. So I would be fully expecting to push into that range. So we continue being patient here and just exercise plenty of patience and just wait, wait, wait. I want to look at the VVIX. Did pull up to the 107 or 119, so it hit that range that we are looking for. I will be looking for a further push down in within the 1 minute time frame. Now that we have closed the inverse cup, we should be expecting the inverse handle to pull upward and then push us back down. So I will be looking for that for the entry. Sorry about that. Still just looking for the downside. I'm not expecting this to have the full breakout yet. I'm expecting basically the 20 MA to reject and to pull us back down and give us our entry right at that range. Now, I can be mistaken, but again, I am looking for that lower Bollinger to be pushed. QQQ didn't even complete the inverse cup yet, so still looking for that. Semiconductors looking for this to reject as well. Should see this rejection to this range, which again is at that 665.40. Okay, and I'm starting to put some entries into some positions here. And these are calls, again, just 0 DTE, just to catch the upside. Give us our push down. You can do it. Still waiting for the push. Just being very, very patient here. QQQ should be pulling back to the 698.71, which would give us a further pull down in the SPY. Should secure us that level that we're looking for. Our ADL on the 5-minute time frame is looking very, very poor as well. So we should be seeing the push down into that range. Go ahead and get off the 5 or 1-minute time frame. Still looking for that push down in the 5-minute here. Should see it. Really need QQQ to break down already. Just holding at that 599.20. I didn't take the SPY calls yet. No, not yet. Um, Still waiting for below that range. What strike am I looking at? I'm looking at the 668, just because that is slightly above where the 5 mont is. NVIDIA can be forming that cup and handle. Micron did form the cup and handle that we talked about earlier. So the inverse cup did not form. Liquid still not buying up yet. Check the dollar and the dollar still elevated. HIG still selling, which is not good. SPY one time frame. Yeah, I'm still expecting that rejection downward. We do have the VVIX pulling back very, very slightly. So if you are in those SPY calls, if yours filled, then look for the 20 month. If not, then just waiting for an entry with me. My calls did not fill, unfortunately. I was off just by a few cents on the order, so unfortunate with that, but I will continue to wait for the next position to open. Now for QQQ, I'm still expecting the push down to the 598.71, which would push the SPY and semiconductors down. However, we do see Micron doing very well, starting to finish out some bullish structure. With the top of that bullish structure being hit, we should see a slight rejection, which can give us the level that we're looking for throughout SPY and everything. I'm not in SPY calls yet. I wanted to be. I missed the entry very, very slightly. I'm still expecting the price to pull down towards that 665 range. But if not, then that means I missed the calls, so that's okay. Now I am gonna go over Apple and precious metals though in a minute. I just want to make sure that I actually did miss the calls and not just trying to get another entry here. So on those SPY calls, you should be trying to target your exit towards that 667.64. That would be the middle Bollinger. Still seeing the VVIX pulling down slightly, so should get that 20 mile range. Fortunate that I missed the entry. It was literally just a couple cents off. So here comes our 5 minute upper Bollinger here. And that exit's going to be at that 667.63 range. When does the inverse cup get invalidated? Um, we still got quite a lot of range on this cup, so let's see. So head and shoulders form there. Bottom of that cup is hit. That cup is being hit. We'd really have to pull all the way back up to the 669 to invalidate the previous bearish structure. Very likely it's just going to be this 20 ma range and chop in this range. Yeah, it happens. You just when you're in zero DT trades, you just have to be in and out. And best example I have on this, see what symbol we were talking about. It was the symbol where I was showing that up and down chop within. Trying to remember what we were looking at earlier. I'll have to figure out what I was looking at earlier. Um, but with these trades, they're very momentary. So within the 5 minute time frame, it's like this trade right here from this 20 ma to lower Bollinger. Second you hit that lower Bollinger range, the trade's done. Um, there really isn't a whole lot of further room to be had, even if we are expecting further within that lower Bollinger range. Um, technically the trade is done at that point. So always just cut out at that lower Bollinger if you are shorting from the 20 mil. Um, that's just something you have to be very cautious of because second it hits that lower Bollinger, it's already starting to position for the next trade, and the next trade was pulling back up towards the 20 mil. Um, now with that said, this trade is pretty much done, and now it's either going to be targeting the upper Bollinger again or back towards the 20 mile. So if you're in those calls should mostly be stopped out. Again, we talked about that 20 mile range being where you would stop those out, but you always just go level to level. Hold on, I'm gonna go tell my daughter bye really quick. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see what's going on. Let's determine if we're going to start rejecting this 20 mile here, or if we're going to continue buying upward. Now, seeing semiconductors starting to close this cup to the upside, we should be expecting some bearish structure to form there. Very likely pulling us back down towards 20 mile. I can actually draw that correctly. Or heading back upward. But again, to have very bearish conditions on the day. The VVIX is super elevated right now. So I actually do think that I'm going to try to take a 20 mile short here. Not something I usually do. So be aware that this can go bad. Shorting at the 20 mile can create the conditions where you will just continue to pull upward and not get the downward short. So be aware of that. But I am going to target some positions for that. Other than that, we are just going to be patient for FOMC or any other entries that open. So same with QQQ here. Rejection does look good. I'm trying to target that. Okay, I do have some puts going. Now again, I am bearish on the day. I do think that we're seeing just a ton of signals that are telling us that we should continue heading downward. We have liquid, HIG, all selling off. NVIDIA has the top of this cup being formed. We should be seeing a rejection from that though. Micron super bullish today. This would have been a great position to take. But from this bullishness, with this upper Bollinger being pushed, should create the conditions to pull back downward slightly. So we are looking for basically QQQ, SPY, semiconductors to reject this 20 mile and to take us towards this lower range at that 665, 60. Yep, I have small put positions going here. Nothing super large. Just seeing if we can catch the rejection off this 20 mile to the downside. Anyway, I will be right back a couple minutes. I will have my chat open, but I just won't be at the computer, so I won't be able to type. But I'll be right back in a couple minutes, everybody. All right, everybody, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go ahead and very quickly go over everything. Oil, super elevated, can be creating a head and shoulders here though. So we will check back on that. But we do have to look out for that because bearishness within oil can become bullishness within equities. Our VVIX is still super elevated today. I'm not really worried about this heading down from here too much. I actually expect it to continue pulling up for the day. Now with SPY, off drawings for a moment. Want to look at the moving averages. They are pulling the 5 mile down. Since open, the 5 mile has pulled down over 20 cents. So that is very significant. Very likely this is going to form a inverse cup to the downside where it's at 665, 66. So we are looking for that. Now within QQQ, kind of the exact same thing here. We're looking for that inverse cup to close. Not really too worried about that turning into anything bullish. Excuse me. And the reason why is because on the 1 minute time frame, which I usually don't stick to the 1 minute time frame at all, but it is nice to see some microstructure on it sometimes. We are seeing that head and shoulders starting to form, so that should take us down towards the low of the day, which would be that 598.71. So we're looking for that within QQQ currently. On the 1 minute time frame, that would mean it would be rejecting the 20 mile and pulling down to the lower Bollinger. Kind of same thing with the 5 minute time frame too. Semiconductors, turn off the drawings. Check the 1 minute time frame here. Semiconductors can be building some bullishness here. We do have exactly what we were looking for in terms of the cup and handle. Excuse me, I'm losing voice all of a sudden. But we do have the bearish structure at the top, potentially starting to build the bullish structure at the bottom. And that's exactly what we'd be looking for the upside for that cup and handle. Check Microsoft is pulling up from that low. And it did close this inverse cup to the downside. So Microsoft should be pulling up, but not for bullish reasons. Expecting basically inverse cup to the downside still. Let's check NVIDIA. NVIDIA can be creating that cup and handle. However, if we continue downward within NVIDIA, it would reject or would invalidate the cup right there. And it would turn into a double top. That double top very likely would take us all the way back down to the 180.70 range. So we will be looking for that. Micron, see what's going on. Micron. Just extension, really not building too much structure off of that. QQQ potentially seeing head and shoulders forming here on the 1 minute time frame. So we will be looking for that. And on PVIX, still holding this super elevated level. Um, this is very indicative of having a bearish day. So a lot of these potentially bullish structures we're seeing, I'm really expecting majority of them to break downward. Dollar's still elevated, but it has been pulling down a little bit today. That can create some bullish price action. Bitcoin still bearish, has been buying up since the lower Bollinger push this morning, which again, that can be creating some of this bullishness that we're seeing. And I don't mean create, I am using the incorrect word there. Bitcoin tends to share a correlation with equities because, it's pretty much institutionally owned at this point. So if there's a large selling day, usually you'll see selling within Bitcoin as well. Likewise with buying. So SPY potentially can be creating this cup and handle. So we will be looking for that. LT still fits within that liquidity. So we can anticipate TLT to be buying upward slightly, which can be somewhat bearish for the market. So a lot of little mixed signals here. Excuse me. Actually closing this up to the upside here. We'll be looking for that. And let's circle back to our volatility. Still super elevated, but just holding range. Now again, we don't really have any data or anything until FOMC, so we can be pretty much chopping until that point. But there's still some scalps to be taken in here, as long as we can find the move within the microstructures. Potentially this can be rejecting, and if this rejects, this can create this larger head and shoulders. Doesn't look like the exact liquidity, but the liquidity is there to do so. And we also have this very potential smaller head and shoulders forming here too. So a lot of small, potentially bull or bearish structure forming. Same with QQQ. This cup has not fully closed. Even though it does look like it still is a few cents off, which does matter. We'll be looking to see if this breaks out and creates that cup and handle breakout, or if this aims to create a inverse handle to the downside. That would be closer to that 660 cents. Our VVIX is pretty much holding very steady here. So it's hard to see the bullish upside taking. I do I do kind of expect this 5 minute 20 mile range, which is basically right at that 667, to be rejected to the downside and to form that inverse cup. Seeing some of that bearish structure in QQQ, and this is on the 1 minute time frame. So if we see this head and shoulders on the 1 minute time frame take, it will definitely tell us that this inverse cup to the downside, back to the low of the day, is extremely likely. Nvidia seeing a little bit of bearish structure in there. If that breaks down, that will create that double top. And I want to look at SPY. SPY is starting to break down, getting that head and shoulders, and invalidating the previous bullish structure if we get the full close on this inverse cup here. So look for that. It's on the 1 minute time frame. That would sort of allude to pulling back towards the low of the day. And continuing to see our breakdown, let's check the VVIX, pulling back up towards that 119. So this is going hand in hand and correlating with everything we're looking at. Seeing this inverse head and shoulders playing out on TLT, that's definitely alluding to further buying or further selling, excuse me. Needs semiconductors to break down a little bit here as we're starting to see bear structure throughout everything else besides really NVIDIA slash semiconductors. So the main thing we're looking for today is for semis to break down, other than, FOMC. Look at NVIDIA. Still just waiting for that breakdown. We're seeing a micro head and shoulders forming here on the 1 minute time frame. So that should take us down very, very likely towards that 181, 83 range. That pulls to the lower Bollinger on the 5 minute time frame, which very, very likely would cause us to complete that double top. I'm gonna need some more coffee here in a minute, or else I'm gonna end up falling asleep on stream. Very slow trading day. To be expected though, we did not have any data in the morning. And pretty much today's data was all FOMC, and that's at 2 p.m. So large majority of the day should be expected to chop until that point. And let's check oil. Oil still potentially creating that head and shoulders. All right, and I know someone wanted me to take a look at Apple, so I'm gonna take a look at Apple really quick. Now, this is the daily time frame, and with Apple, yeah, exactly, exactly that. We do need to adjust it though. We did complete the inverse cup already, so this is telling us almost verbatim that we're trying to complete that inverse cup's handle, starting to get this smaller handle downward. Should pull back towards the lower Bollinger. Lower Bollinger from this move would complete this further cup and give us our breakdown towards this range of liquidity. So that's what I'd be really looking for on Apple is basically pulling down towards roughly in that 225 to 227 range. Probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks out. 5 minute time frame, sort of the same thing on Apple here. We did complete this inverse cup downward, and there is a ton of liquidity there, so the expectation should be to continue building liquidity within this range and to break down. That liquidity can pull upward before that breakdown though, so just be aware of that. But yeah, that's Apple. Does look very bearish right now in terms of the moving averages. Yeah, it's starting to pull towards that 200-day moving average. So yeah, this is starting to look very bearish. I think the downside here on Apple is pretty dang large. Okay, let's go back to the SPY. Minute time frame. Still potentially this head and shoulders forming here. So look for this rejection to occur. Our VVIX is still pulling upwards, so still just extremely bearish conditions overall. QQQ, we are seeing this head and shoulders starting to form. The rejection from the 20-mile range on the 1 minute time frame would pull us down to that 599.87 range, which that would start triggering this lower Bollinger on the 5 minute time frame. So that's looking good. Now I am going to be ending the stream in a few minutes here, just because I do need to a couple errands while we are still chopping. So if there's any final questions, now's a great time. Yeah, today is a terrible trading day in terms of, the current price action. It's to be expected though. Really with these days when there's not a lot of data, and I will pull up the data sets here. Just give me one moment. And I do apologize if this turns the screen very white for a moment, so be aware of that. 3, 2, 1. A heat map. It's not the heat map, I just have it labeled as heat map. Um, anyway, today we really didn't have a whole lot of data. Well, I guess we did have the PPI this morning for February, which that came in slightly elevated, so that should create selling on the day. Definitely did. Other than that, we don't have any data, excuse me, until this FOMC release at 2 p.m. So on days when there isn't a whole lot of data like this, Hold on. Sorry about that. So on days when there isn't a whole lot of data, even though today, yes, we did have a lot of data, but the producer price index, we already know producers are having to step prices up overall, especially with oil going up. Um, should definitely be seeing the PPI climbing, so I don't think that's anything the market didn't really expect. The forecast today was a lot cooler, but I think that's kind of foolish. Um, the last 2 days, we haven't seen a lot of data. Today we do have data, but it's the FOMC, and the FOMC really is priced in currently. Let's open the CME. Yeah, I mean, the CME has the pause today basically at 99%. We shouldn't be expecting anything outside of that. Yeah, I could see that, the PPI being a lot of data. Um, it's more so if the market has it priced in or not. Hold on, I have to take a drink. My throat is just killing me. Sorry about that. Okay, so it's mainly about if the data is priced in or not. Um, yes, the forecast showed lower, but the previous data was already very elevated to begin with. So, seeing these elevated numbers within the PPI really isn't that far out of the expectations of the day. So, wasn't really priced in, but wasn't really outside of the range of what could be priced in for the day, if that makes sense. Um, with the FOMC, we pretty much have the FOMC priced in. It's 99% that we're going to have a pause today. Anything volatility wise coming from the FOMC will be from the press conference, really, unless there's something secret hiding within the statement that no one's expecting right now. Um, but with this being priced in and everything, we should be expecting essentially a lot of chop until we start seeing data or some sort of news that kind of changes the speculation of the chop, changes the speculation of no longer just being within those expected ranges. So that's what really drives the price action. Um, today we saw the PPI pull the market downward, but after that pull down, we're just chopping in range, waiting for the FOMC. Our VVIX is still climbing though on the day, even though we are chopping within this range, which to me this is a very this bearish structure building out. So if we see the continuation of this bear structure, should pull us down. But basically no data until FOMC, so nothing to really move off of too much. Oh no, no worries. No worries at all. Liquid still just holding this tight selling range here. Gig, same thing, seeing a little bit of buying, but this isn't really indicative of pushing back upward type buying. Bitcoin probably still down. Yeah, Bitcoin starting to reject that 20 mile range on the 5 minute time frame. So this does sort of allude to pushing down with the rest of equities like we're expecting. We'll see if Nvidia completes this cup. It did reject this micro head and shoulders, so we can delete that. QQQ starting to reject this micro head and shoulders as well. So we'll see if this turns into a cup and handle type setup, something like that to head to the upside. Not really expecting that though. Just something we have to be aware of. Can be pulling up to the upper Bollinger here on the 5-minute time frame. Not really expecting it though, with how heavily we are seeing the VVIX rise. This is telling us that dealers are actively having to pay more to ensure their positions. You wouldn't be doing that if the market was, intending to head upward. Dollar still very elevated. Lots of chop, just a ton of chop. We also have oil prices super elevated today as well. Let's see what they're at currently. So the head and shoulders did play out a little bit. But now that we are pushing into the lower Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame, this can create the conditions where we can see oil start breaking out back to the upside. So be aware of that. Something we will be looking for the bearish side. Yeah, if I later on I will be doing a lot of the live streams when there's the FOMC and a lot of these data sets later in the day. Just currently with excuse me, with how my current schedule is, I have to chop up the day a little bit. But that is the plan later on, is that I would be basically streaming the entire trading session, um, including that FOMC. Yes, I do think it is worth holding the 667 puts. Again, I still see today being a selling type day, um, especially with how elevated our VVIX is right now. I mean, it's just absurdly elevated. Yeah, it's pulling up towards that 120 range now. So, this is just telling us that selling very, very likely is going to activate today. Usually you don't see the VVIX rising with a market that's going to be buying upward. So, I really do expect some of this bear structure to play out and for us to really start heading back down towards that 665 range. We did talk about how pulling in this liquidity range could create the conditions for a bounce, but I'm not really seeing that bounce right now. We're essentially just trading right at that 5 mile range, and that's on the daily time frame. This isn't the daily time frame. I'm talking about the 5 mile level on the daily time frame, which I believe is basically right at the 667.06. Yeah, so we're just chopping right at that 5 mile. Um, but I do fully expect us to push downward. I don't really expect anything within the FOMC to come and save the market. It's not like we're going to be having any rate cuts anytime soon. Um, we have a conflict with Iran currently going on, which generally central banks tend to really just kind of pause all operations when that happens. Now, when I say pause operations, that doesn't mean ceasing operations. That just means basically continuing to do exactly what they were doing in that current position or right before the conflict started. So with our Fed, that's basically just pausing and continuing to slowly sell treasuries, short end treasuries, excuse me. So that should be really the expectation of what the Fed will be doing um, until this conflict is over. So, uh, like I said, the central banks usually do not want to be touching monetary policy or influencing anything within the financials while there is a conflict going on because there's real world I can't talk. real world implications of what a conflict does. It could be stopping the oil routes, it could be causing fluctuations within all sorts of commodities. So they want their hands off during that time as much as possible. So yeah, I don't expect um Fed to really come save the market today or anything. It's really what I'm trying to get at. Seeing SPY starting to break down again. Um, Really, I'm targeting this lower 665 range. All right, everybody, I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream here. The expectation for the day should be set. Really, we should be seeing some downside, um, especially with the 5 minute time frame chopping at this 20 MA for such a long period of time. We should be seeing the push into this lower Bollinger. Our VVIX is super, super, super elevated. So, again, I'm not expecting FOMC to come save the market. Not really expecting any form of data or narrative to pull the market out of this selling currently. So, fully expecting that 665 downside. So, we just got past the cursed number of the 666.66. Yeah, you're very welcome, everybody. Hopefully the puts end up paying out. I'm still holding my 0DT puts, so again, like I said, I'm 100% expecting this downside. If we don't get that downside, then that will be the third loss that I've had in roughly what, 2 months of streaming. Um, and again, that's because we took this 20 mile range for the puts. Um, if we took the calls, or for those of you that did take the calls at that lower Bollinger, you did have a really awesome trade. But gosh, I cannot talk today. I apologize. But other than that trade so far, nothing has really opened in terms of the 5 minute time frame. We haven't had a move above or below the upper or lower Bollinger to really position. So just a lot of chop. Um, But with us taking puts at that 20 mile, we do run the risk of, pulling back up towards that upper Bollinger. So hoping that doesn't occur. Our VVIX is telling us that that shouldn't occur, but you know, we are within the type of market where a single tweet can change, the entire day. So just be aware of that. But with that said, have a great day, everybody. I'm not going to be making any video for the rest of the week, unfortunately, until Sunday. Again, I do have my in-laws coming to town basically in like an hour. So, I'm going to be spending time with them basically until this Saturday. So, um, yeah, I won't be streaming Friday morning, but I will be back Sunday with my video, and Monday morning I will be streaming again. So, I look forward to seeing you all there. Other than that, I hope everyone has a great day. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great week.